Chief Medical Officer Ethan Reeves wiped the sweat from his brow, the acrid smell of antiseptic barely masking the underlying stench of blood and scorched earth. The makeshift field hospital, a patchwork of prefab structures and reinforced tents, buzzed with the constant hum of medical equipment and the low murmur of voices. Outside, the distant rumble of artillery fire served as a grim reminder of the ongoing conflict that had brought them to this desolate world. Ethan's weathered face, lined with the stress of countless battlefield surgeries, betrayed a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. At 37, he had seen more death and suffering than any person should in a lifetime. Yet here he was, on an alien world light years from Earth, fighting a war against an enemy that humanity barely understood. "Chief, we've got incoming wounded," called out Corporal Jake Sullivan, his junior medic. At 24, Jake's youthful features still held a trace of the idealism that had led him to volunteer for this posting. His blue eyes, usually bright with enthusiasm, now held a shadow of concern. Ethan nodded, already moving towards the triage area. "What's the situation, Jake?" Scout team ran into a Vrel Nari patrol. 3 wounded, 1 critical, Jake reported, falling into step beside his mentor. As they reached the incoming patients, Ethan's trained eye quickly assessed the injuries. 2 of the soldiers had relatively minor plasma burns, painful but not life-threatening. The third, however, was in bad shape. A young private, barely out of his teens, with a gaping chest wound that bubbled with each labored breath. "Tension pneumothorax," Ethan muttered, his mind already racing through the necessary procedures. "Jake, get me a chest tube stat, and prep or 2 for emergency surgery." As they worked to stabilize the critically wounded soldier, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on the bizarre twist of fate that had brought humanity into this interstellar conflict. The Vrel Nari, a highly advanced alien species, had seemed peaceful at first contact. Cultural misunderstandings and resource disputes had quickly spiraled into open warfare, and now both species found themselves locked in a bitter struggle across multiple star systems. Hours passed in a blur of surgeries and treatments. Ethan had just finished closing up the young private, cautiously optimistic about his chances, when the relative calm of the field hospital was shattered by the shriek of incoming artillery. Incoming, the shout went up, followed by the thunderous impact of shells striking nearby. The prefab structures shuddered, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. Ethan steadied himself against an operating table, his heart pounding. "Everyone stay calm," he called out, his voice cutting through the panic. "Jake, status report." Before Jake could respond, another volley of fire struck even closer. The lights flickered ominously, and Ethan could hear the whine of failing shield generators. "Sir, our defenses are down," Jake shouted over the din. "Enemy forces are advancing on our position." Ethan's mind raced. The field hospital was supposed to be in a secure area, well behind the front lines. If the Vrel Nari had broken through, the situation was dire indeed. "Initiate emergency protocols," Ethan ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Begin evacuating all ambulatory patients." "Jake, you oversee the evac. I'll coordinate the critical cases." As the medical staff scrambled to follow his orders, Ethan moved swiftly between beds, assessing which patients could be moved and which would require more complex evacuation procedures. The sound of small arms fire grew closer, punctuated by the alien screeches of Vrel Nari energy weapons. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the entire structure. Ethan was thrown to the ground, his ears ringing from the blast. As he struggled to his feet, he saw that a large section of the hospital's outer wall had been blown away, exposing them to the harsh alien environment and the advancing enemy forces. Through the breach, Ethan caught his first glimpse of the Vrel Nari in combat. Tall, insectoid creatures with iridescent exoskeletons, they moved with unsettling speed and precision. Their mandibles clicked in what he assumed was communication, and multiple compound eyes swiveled independently, taking in every detail of their surroundings. "Chief, we've got to fall back," Jake's voice cut through Ethan's momentary paralysis. The young medic was helping a wounded soldier to his feet, his face streaked with dirt and determination. Ethan nodded, turning to assist with the evacuation. But as he reached for the nearest patient, a stray energy blast struck nearby, showering him with debris. Through the settling dust, he saw a group of Vrel Nari soldiers entering the hospital. Time seemed to slow as Ethan watched the alien warriors sweep through the ward. Their weapons were at the ready, but to his surprise, they weren't firing indiscriminately. Instead, they seemed to be searching for something. Or someone. Then Ethan saw it. Among the Vrelnari troops was a larger individual, its carapace adorned with intricate patterns that he guessed denoted high rank. But this leader was stumbling, green ichor seeping from a wound in its thorax. As if in slow motion, Ethan saw the alien commander collapse, its soldiers chittering in what could only be alarm. In that moment, all of Ethan's training, all of his oaths as a doctor, crystallized into a single, overwhelming imperative. "Jake," he shouted, already moving towards the fallen Vrelnari. "Cover me." "Chief, what are you doing?" Jake's voice was filled with disbelief, but to his credit, the young medic was already positioning himself to provide cover. Ethan approached the group of aliens, his hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of non-aggression. "I'm a doctor," he said, knowing they probably couldn't understand him. "I can help." The Vrelnari soldiers turned their weapons on him, their alien features unreadable. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Your leader is injured. I can save him." For a tense moment, Ethan was certain he was about to die. Then, to his amazement, the alien soldiers stepped aside. Whether they understood his words or simply recognized his intent, they were allowing him to approach their fallen commander. Ethan knelt beside the injured Vrelnari, his medical training kicking in as he assessed the wound. The alien physiology was unlike anything he'd ever treated, but the principles of trauma care were universal. He could see that the energy weapon had penetrated the exoskeleton, damaging what he guessed was a primary respiratory organ. "Jake, I need the regen unit and a full xenobiology kit," Ethan called out, his hands already working to stem the flow of ichor. Jake hesitated for only a second before springing into action. "On it, Chief." As Ethan worked to stabilize the alien leader, he was acutely aware of the Vrelnari soldiers watching his every move. The sounds of battle continued around them, but in this small pocket of the field hospital, an uneasy truce had formed. Minutes stretched into hours as Ethan fought to save the life of a being he had, until recently, considered an enemy. The work was grueling, requiring all of his skill and improvisation. Jake assisted silently, anticipating Ethan's needs with an efficiency born of countless shared surgeries. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ethan sat back on his heels. I think we've done it," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The Vrelnari commander's breathing had stabilized, the wound sealed with a combination of human medical technology and improvised techniques. As if on cue, the alien's compound eyes flickered open, focusing on Ethan with an unsettling intensity. For a long moment, human and alien regarded each other in silence. Then, to Ethan's astonishment, the Vrelnari leader raised a multi-jointed limb and placed it on Ethan's shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably one of gratitude. The alien soldiers immediately surrounded their commander, chittering excitedly. One of them approached Ethan, holding out a small, crystalline device. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan accepted it. As soon as the device touched his hand, it hummed to life. A holographic display appeared, showing a crude but recognizable map of the battlefield. Ethan's eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing: the Vrelnari battle plans. Chief Jake whispered, his voice filled with awe. "I think they're surrendering." Before Ethan could respond, the sound of human voices and booted feet approached. A squad of Marines burst into the room, weapons raised, only to pull up short at the bizarre scene before them. "Hold your fire," Ethan shouted, stepping between the humans and the Vrelnari. "They've surrendered. The war. I think the war is over." In the days that followed, the full impact of Ethan's actions became clear. The Vrelnari commander he had saved was Zar Thax, one of the highest-ranking military leaders in their species. Ethan's act of compassion, saving the life of an enemy combatant, had opened the door to communication and eventual peace talks. As Ethan stood before a joint human Vrelnari committee, recounting the events of that fateful day, he couldn't help but reflect on the strange twists of fate that had brought them all to this point. In the end, he concluded, his voice carrying across the hushed chamber, it wasn't our weapons or strategies that won the day. It was our shared capacity for compassion, our universal respect for life. In saving Zar Thax, we didn't just save an individual, we saved countless lives on both sides by bringing an end to the conflict. Jake, standing at attention nearby, caught Ethan's eye and gave a subtle nod of pride. They had joined this war as soldiers and medics, but they would leave it as diplomats and peacemakers. As the committee adjourned, Ethan found himself face to face with Zarthax. The alien leader's mandibles clicked in what Ethan now recognized as a gesture of respect. Through a translator, Zarthax spoke, "You have taught us much, Ethan Reeves, about your species and about ourselves. The road ahead will not be easy, but thanks to you, we now walk it together." Ethan nodded, a mixture of emotions welling up inside him. "We've all lost too much in this war," he said, "but if we can build something positive from it, a lasting peace, a true understanding between our peoples, then perhaps it will not have been in vain." As he left the chamber, Ethan's thoughts turned to the future. There would be challenges ahead, cultural gaps to bridge, and wounds, both physical and emotional, to heal. But for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of true hope. The war was over. The healing had begun. And Ethan Reeves, battlefield medic turned unlikely peacemaker, would be there every step of the way, armed not with weapons, but with compassion, understanding, and the universal language of healing.